The median age in Cameroon is 19. Paul Biya, the current president, has been in power for 43 years. He has been in power longer than most of his population, way before any of his, or a good number, I think 70% of his population were ever born. 43 years. 70% of his population were not born. I mean, right? Like, guys, like this is mind blowing. Think about, how do you draft a national vision? How do you draft national policies, right? The disconnect is it's so mind blowing. We're talking about an age of artificial intelligence, of quantum computing, of cloud computing, of robotics, of machine learning, Internet of Things. Paul Biya doesn't even know how to freaking turn on our computer.
Hey, my people, welcome back to the breakdown panel this week. Now, it has been a busy few weeks for us here at PanaGenius, between UN Week last month and then planning our annual conference and awards program, the BlackStars Experience, which is coming up next month in New York City, which, by the way, I can't stress this enough, but you need to be there. This is not something that you can miss, okay? At PanaGenius, we're not just talking. That is not the goal. We're tired of the summits, right? But what we're really focused on is on building solutions. The BlackStars Experience is where ideas turn into action, where we connect people who are actually shaping the future. So here's what I would say. If you are a corporate professional, and I know Nee doesn't like that word, if you are a business owner or even a college student, this event is for you. It's not just another event. It's about being ready for what's next in your career or business at a time when every industry is being disrupted and redefined. And here's the truth. Right now, you can't afford to be in a silo, or so to speak, right? You can't afford to not have the right network, the people who open doors, make decisions, and really help change your trajectory. And that's exactly the type of people that will be in the room, from Fortune 500 leaders, top executives, investors, and entrepreneurs who are deciding what gets funded, who gets hired, and where opportunity flows next. But beyond that, it's also about collaboration, how we come together to build the world that we want to see. And I know the PanaGenius TV family here cares deeply about that. So let's come together. Let's connect our ideas, our voices, and our power and build together. So here's what I want you to do. Visit BlackStarsExperience.com to check out the lineup of speakers and honorees. And for our PanaGenius TV family, for you can use the code PanaGenius TV to get 20% off when you register. This is exclusively for our PanaGenius TV family here. So I'm looking forward to seeing many of you there, meeting many of you in person. And it's going to be such a great and transformational 2 days. So looking forward to spending it together. We've got a lot to unpack today. And I want us to get going, get into today's conversation. Here's what we're talking about today. Can one small African country stand up to Trump? Why is the world's youngest continent still ruled by its oldest leaders? And why are Gen Zs rising up across Africa? And what does that tell us? I've got Hornsby Nee Sarpey, a researcher on African geopolitics, joining me today. And I'm sure at some point Fanta will be joining in as well. But Nee, let's get started. Now, I want to switch gears to talk about Burkina Faso, okay? Now, their Prime Minister, Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, is speaking out and accusing the U.S. of essentially blackmail. And I mean, why? Because he said a few weeks ago they rejected a proposal to accept U.S. deportees. And within, a few weeks later, which was last week or Friday, the United States Embassy in Burkina Faso has quietly stopped issuing visas to their citizens. So he's saying, wait, are we being blackmailed here because we stopped, we didn't want to accept this deal, so is that why the US has now stopped issuing visas? And he's speaking out. Now, this is what he said. This is what he said regarding the proposal that was put in front of them. He said, naturally, this proposal, which we deemed indecent at the time, is totally contrary to the value of dignity, which is part of the very essence of the vision of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. So I want to get your reaction on this, right, Me? And what does this tell us about the moment that we're in?
It tells us that nationalism is a force that we need to constantly reckon with. As much as nations, peoples of the world continue to see themselves as part of nations, we would also need to find ways to talk, correspond, relate with each other beyond obsession with nationalism. Why am I starting on this angle? It's simple. The whole thing about American deportations, and like I said in the last few episodes of our conversations, is that the people pushing that are looking to push a certain view of America. They're looking to push a certain narrative, and in doing that, they would like to sort of explicate their problems to the third world. I think it was Nkrumah who said that the nature of imperialism is that it can export its social conflicts to the rest of the world, and so that's what Burkina Faso is being forced to bear as a brunt, right? You are bearing the brunt of an empire trying to get rid of its problems and give it to you, and so looking at the problem in that way gives us an idea of the challenge, because if you just look at it as a relationship between two countries, these are not two countries on equal footing,
right?
And we need to refuse the temptation to look at it as, it's just Burkina Faso versus the US. No, it's a global superpower versus a country in transition. And that's an unfair fight. And so for those of us who would actually sympathize,
it's an unfair fight. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned it. Yes, it is unfair and very, very symbolic too, right? Because one of the things I say is that power is not about your size. It's not about how much money you have. It's not about even your influence, right? But it's about your ability to believe in what you believe in, to say no if that's what you believe in and mean it, irrespective of the consequences, right? And that's what we're seeing from Burkina Faso today is a kind of a reset of how we think about power. And I think it's coming at such a critical time, for Africa. And that's why I asked you, what does this mean for us in this moment? Because for me, I don't see this as the beginning, right? I actually see this as what is going to become the trend for the next 3 years of Trump's presidency. So they're redefining. I see it as a redefining of what power and leadership means. So just to be clear, you agree with their decision, correct?
With
Burkina Faso, was it the right move to say no to the deportation deal?
Yeah, but I don't think it's that's where the problem ends, right? In asserting your authority or your sovereignty, you have the right to say no.
Yeah.
But then again, if couched within the context of global politics, then we can say this is one. And let me give you one reason why you need to look at it that way. There'll be lots of Burkinabes who are looking to go to school in the US. There'll be lots of Burkinabes who are looking to go to the US for business or look to see family and whatever. Now, if it is true, if what the Prime Minister is alleging is true, what the cessation of visas does is that it causes internal conflict in Burkina Faso. So you actually get, factions within the country now sort of, are loggerheads, because there will be a middle class that can afford to go to the US that is not, taking the authority in Burkina Faso to task. Why don't you just accept these people? Because you are delaying our futures, you are delaying our business. We cannot save our families because you just can't or don't want to accept deportees. So that is what power does. You talk about power as, being assertive. Power is also the ability to elicit dread. Power is the ability for someone to invoke fear and dread in you. So the power the United States has here is that it can actually invoke wranglings within Burkina Faso by rejecting. I heard the story on the BBC of a young woman from, was it Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken? It's an Eastern African country, who is stuck in Kenya because he's South Sudan. Great. She's from South Sudan. She's stuck in Kenya. And she has a scholarship to attend Harvard or Columbia. And because South Sudan was put on that list of no visas, she's stuck in Kenya. Now, this is a future that is being delayed, if not denied. You get it? So, if these numbers accumulate, if the middle class or the aspirational class within Burkina Faso increasingly find themselves, having their futures delayed or denied because of a decision by the state authorities, what you find is that this decision by the United States would cause internal wrangling. And that's why I'm saying that if you look at it within the architecture of global politics, you find out that Burkina Faso's saying no doesn't actually solve their problem. It doesn't just solve their, because this is not the only lever that Americans could also pull. The Americans pull levers.
But then, how do we talk about sovereignty? Right, and you talk about, you're a proponent of that, right? But I hear you saying two things, because you want Africa to be sovereign, but at the same time, you're saying that we need to play by the global rules, or so to speak. Oh, there has to be some sort of and I hear what you're saying, because the consequences are real. They're economic. I hear what you're saying. There's consequences, but sometimes isn't it better, and this is a question, what is it, short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Could this be seen as that what, this is the time for us to finally, because these type of deals have been happening for decades, and quite frankly, that's why we're here, because of our fear of what's going to happen when we say no to deals that we know are not good for us, right? So, I really want you to reframe or to explain what exactly you're saying. What is the option, truly, that is on the table for Burkina Faso in this situation?
Like I mentioned, the cessation of visas would not be the only lever that Americans could pull.
Probably not.
Americans could pull, it won't be the only one. And so that's why I'm saying that saying no to the Americans right now isn't the end of your problems. It's not. But let me go back to what you were saying. Short-term pain. The problem is managing expectations and interests within the country, right? There's a thing that African leaders do where usually when they manage the expectations or interests of the middle class or the aspirational class within the capital cities, they feel like the work is done, right? And I don't want to start another problem, but this was what led to this idea of Afropolitanism. Now, viewers, I'm sure those who have heard the word before would remember, but the whole idea that you need to cater to the urban aspirational middle class and fulfill their interests, and when you do that, they are not going to tweet, they are not going to put on Facebook that your government is right, they are not going to lead Gen Z protests because things are good. You get what I mean? So it's up to the Burkinabe authorities to manage the interest. I don't know how they are going to do it, and that's where a continental framework or a continental alliance is important, because then if there's a continental alliance or a continental allyship, Burkina Faso has a bigger, stone or rock to stand upon when it asserts its sovereignty. But left alone,
Yeah.
it would need to deal with again the wranglings that this will cause, the friction that this will cause, especially within the urban areas of that country. Like, the thing about African leaders over the last, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years is that they've always spoken to a certain kind of people. And with social media, with social media and connectivity, now you need to speak to the people who are actually telling your story to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need them. You don't need them putting the bad word outside. You don't need them putting the dirty leanings outside. And I think that's what the Burkinabe government will need to manage when it accrues, when the visa rejections accrue, and people start murmuring and going. That's where the real pressure comes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the real pressure comes.
And to be fair,
so you need to manage that.
It wasn't clear that when they rejected the proposal from the U.S., right? It wasn't clear that would be the consequence. It wasn't accept this deal or we're gonna stop issuing visa ban, right? So that's why they thought they had an option. They thought it was, hey, accept this. These deportees will pay you or whatever was offered in exchange, right? And oh well, look who finally made it. Hello, Fanta.
Guys, I'm
Fanta just entered the room, y'all. Hi, Fanta. Can we welcome?
I'm so sorry. I'm in Mountain Time, so usually your 10 o'clock is my 8 o'clock. So when
I knew, I figured, I knew, I was like, oh, she must have gotten the time code, the what is it? The time zone confused. Yeah. Well, we started with without you, but you're coming at the right time because Nee is giving me a hard time here. So I'm glad you've entered the time.
Am I?
No, actually, Nee has been good. Nee has been good. But we're talking about Burkina Faso. And, the recent news that basically they're now being punished but that's what the foreign minister is saying, that they're being punished for rejecting the prime minister. Yes. Is saying that they're being punished for rejecting a deportation deal. Right. And so we're talking about that, what sovereignty means, in this time. And he is basically saying this is going to have consequences, right? Which we know. And then I asked him, when we talk about short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Is this one of those situations where we need to be looking at it from that lens? Because yes, the consequences are real, but how do we really become sovereign if we don't start making these bold decisions, right? So that's where we are. Do you want to chime in, Fanta?
Absolutely. I really just put out of bed. But look, it's about, as with anything, if you choose to lead a life of decency, you do have to have established principles, and those principles require sacrifices. It's as simple as that. There's no way you can think about being an independent or being an independent entity, person, country, owning your sovereignty if you're not ready to make those sacrifices. It's very much akin to making any type of life decisions. Just as a leader, you're making those decisions for your country and the welfare of your people. I mean, let's just super simplify it. You want to get married, you're not going to get married to any Joe Blow. You're going to have at least, from a very, very fundamentally, a list of 3-5 items that are non-negotiables, right? And when you come across like something that challenges those principles, you're going to push back. It is absolutely necessary. There is no even ifs, ands, buts about this. It's absolutely necessary that African leaders understand, in order to truly ensure you are sovereign, you do have to make sacrifices, and those are going to be cutting some old and familiar ties. And even if it means that for a temporary period, which is absolutely going to be temporary, because as we know, Western leaders are also quote unquote practice democracy, right? So every now and then a new leader gets elected that comes with his own
Mm-hmm.
and those policies are going to change. But if you don't make those sacrifices, if you don't put your foot down, as simply put, you're going to be continue, right? And I hate to keep saying this, but you're going to continue to be subjected to those colonial and imperialistic tendencies when they are absolutely not good for you. They've done nothing good for you, and actually all they've done is keep you under their thumb. When we look at, even the issue like with the CFAs, right? Like the CFA franc being tied to French,
France.
yeah, like being tied like to France, and their and their headquarters, their treasury headquarters is in France. 50% of that gets it's like free money, like going to France. So what is this like temporary decision that has to be made to solidify that absolutely you're on this path of sovereignty and you're actually serious about it? So I absolutely support the Sahel leaders. They have to do this, like especially with Burkina Faso. There is no if ends buts about it. It's a non-negotiable, frankly.
And I guess the question now is, and I think, Nee, you brought up a good point, because ultimately this is about, one of the things I said in my episode about this yesterday is the sad thing about all of this is Burkina Faso is standing alone, right? Standing alone and is fighting alone, right? A small landlocked country under military rule, right? And here they are standing up to Trump alone. This would have been a moment. I mean, I know that Nigeria also, came out a couple of months ago and said the U.S. approached them, and we have to, make that clear. And they said no. But this is sort of the Burkina Faso situation is different in the sense that it is the first that we're seeing where there's been a clear kind of, retaliation from the U.S. Okay, you said no to the U.S. deportation deal. 2 weeks later, now we're not issuing your people visas, right? And they're speaking out about it and saying, listen, this is blackmail. They are calling it what it is. But they're doing it alone. So what does that mean? When a few weeks ago, also, Ghana made a deal, cut a deal, and in the name of Pan-African solidarity, right? In the name of Pan-African solidarity. So, I guess the question is, how do we really assert? I mean, can Burkina Faso fight this fight alone? Or is this the moment where African leaders need to come together, stand together and say no? At least maybe Nigeria can join their efforts and start calling it what it is and saying no. But could this be the spark of something else?
Well, like I mentioned before, Fanta joined us, the whole point of this, conversation on immigration should be couched within the global significance it has attained. Nationalism in certain parts of the West means that there are elements within those countries that are looking to redefine British identity, American identity, I don't know, whatever, French identity. They're looking to redefine it or define it in a certain way. Therefore, there are elements within those countries that are asking for deportations, repatriations, and what they call remigration, especially in a place like Germany, where they're saying, well, yes, right now you are a citizen, but then you are a citizen of the wrong ethnicity. So go back to where you came from. There are elements within national politics in these countries calling for that. If that is not a global issue, I don't know what is. This is not a one-on-one thing. This is not the US versus Burkina Faso problem. The US versus Burkina Faso thing is a reflection of a global problem.
Right.
And
right.
It's a global problem. And that's why I was very impressed with John Mahama of Ghana at the UN General Assembly saying that. And he said it boldly, that usually when elements in the Western countries say they have a immigration crisis, they are talking about people from global South countries.
Yeah.
They usually don't say they have a immigration crisis if the people look like them. They don't say that. They are saying immigration crisis. Your being is problematized, right? Your being there as well as your being alive is problematic, and so that debate isn't just Burkina Faso versus how do you call it, versus
The
the
US.
United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this, I hope this is an invitation, or this is at least a signal for other countries to look at it in that way, and not just a case of, okay, well, I'll say no to the United States. Yes, you can't say no to the United
but
States.
that's why I'm asking,
But
right?
it
That
won't be-
should more African nations be joining
I
Burkina
can
Faso?
only hope. I can
Okay.
only hope that African countries actually take this as a nod in a certain direction. That, listen, we need to talk about this within the global context that it should be placed. It should be placed within a context of nationalism, basically, rearing its ugly head again in a certain part of the world,
Well, this
which
is not
means
very
that
true.
it's pushing out certain people.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Pardon?
but this is nothing new. And what irks me is the fact that African leaders are fake. Let's call them what they are. They use the UN stage as open night for performance, right? They go there to make their best performances, eloquent speeches, elaborate terms, right? When the light turns off, when they get off that stage, they go behind the closet and they're begging their colonizers on their knees. So in New York, they're performing on these stages, but they still have Western bases in their countries. How the heck do you expect to stand on the stage where you're supposed to be an equal partner and assert, right, that level of equality, but once you're off that stage, you're back to playing kitty, or I should say kitty cat. Because once you have Western troops on your soil, their military on your soil, I'm sorry, you are a subject. These African leaders have been castrated. Same thing for Ruto. You stand on the UN stage and you talk about global financial this and what have you, but back home, you can't even draft simple policies to appease the Gen Z protests that have been going on and raging for years now. You've killed so many of your own people, but the audacity to stand on the UN stage to perform as if to say it was open mic. Who's giving you prizes? And then you go start buying.
In fairness, the General Assembly is open mic for
No,
everyone.
but then you go, no, but for African leaders, like the audacity of them, and I'm sick and tired of this, and we should hold them like accountable. Muhammad cannot stand on the UN stage and speak about African sovereignty and speak about all of these different African strength, independence, like what have you. But then you're still hosting U.S. military. I'm sorry, you're still taking immigrants who are not Ghanaians. Look, you have to stand up and say, look, I still know where I still know that I'm a man of some sort. Therefore, my foot is going to go down on this one. I stand with my people. If they're Nigerians, let them go back to Nigeria, right? Otherwise,
and you bring up a good point, Fanta, because one of the criticisms that Burkina Faso is facing is a lot of people are asking, well, why didn't they just accept their, Burkina deportees? Because apparently the proposal included accepting, deportees who are Burkinabe, but also foreign nationals. So why couldn't they just say, okay, we'll take our own people, but we're not taking others? But they refused the deal overall. So what are your thoughts about that? Should they have accepted Burkinabe deportees?
It's about the bigger picture, right? It's not as if you had some Burkinabes who say committed a crime in the U.S. and they served their time and the law is to deport them. That's a completely different story. We're talking about an inhumane immigration policy here that is not designed that is not designed for any type of human reasons. So we have to take that into context. And they're in all their rights to say no and see right through that and say absolutely not. Take your visas. We don't have to go to the United States.
So I guess the question now, me go for it.
Exactly. So it comes back to exactly what I said, right? How do you manage the internal tensions that would arise from a cessation? Again, that's what the Prime Minister is alleging. A cessation of visas to the United States will undoubtedly raise tensions within the Burkinabe middle class. So how does an authority...
Will it though? I mean, Traoré seemed to have a lot of support from his own people. So will it?
Great, but...
What's the evidence that we have that it would?
The potential for it actually raising... raising tensions within the middle class is always there, especially for people who would like to go and see families, go to school, conduct businesses. There is always that potential, and my point is that how does authority within that country manage that? If it doesn't happen to Burkina Faso, it doesn't mean it can't happen to, say, Nigeria or another country. It will happen. So how does an authority that says no to the United States, and I am all for you being able to say no. The repercussions, however, that's why I think that we should have a coordinated African response.
Yeah.
Right? Because there will be repercussions. There will undoubtedly be repercussions. And that's why I think that there should be an African response to some of these things.
Yeah, and this is where what we've been talking about in this show, leverage comes in, right? Leverage. Where is Burkina Faso's leverage in this situation, right? If we're talking about the next move, what should it do in preparation and anticipation for the fact that it's probably not going to end with the visa, right? Something else is probably going to come until they get what they want. So what is Burkina Faso prepared to do next? What is it prepared to... what could it leverage, right? Use as leverage in this point in time? And even bigger than that, this is why the continental response is important, because honestly, it's just so hard to see how a small country could fight and win in this situation, as opposed to if the continent was to come together and say, hey, Trump, we know you want our critical minerals. If you're going to stop issuing our people visas, guess what? You can't have our minerals in the DRC. Like, how? It just seems like that's the solution that we need in this moment. And it could be a turnaround moment.
So,
do you guys actually now see the problem with nationalism?
Wait, there are two solutions to this, right? Or two ways that the continent and Burkina Faso can address this. We know that the U.S. or the West is good at one thing when they do not get their way, and it's sanctions, right? Oh, you've been sanctioned with this, and you've been sanctioned with that. Russia has survived. Other countries that have been sanctioned have survived. They find alternative means to do business. They find alternative means to engage. And to some of the points that Neve brought up earlier, like go to school and like what have you, look, our people have to understand that this has to be a collective effort. If we as individual countries want sovereignty, if the continent is striving for sovereignty, the people have to strive for sovereignty. Look, it cannot just be like the leaders, right? We too have a responsibility to say, look, that once a year, twice a year trip I often make to the Western world, perhaps I should make it to the Eastern world, right? And understand that we're fighting for a bigger picture here. And that's where the vision comes into play as a leader. Ensuring that vision doesn't only exist, but the people understands it and they themselves buy into it, to understand that, look, there are going to come times where sacrifices will be required. And without that, then you have this disconnect, or then you might have this uprising of a sort. But let's be very realistic. Most of the population in these individual countries and across like the continent, they're not in the middle class. These people, the majority of Africans care about waking up in the morning, having a safe and secure environment, having their children go to school, being able to work. These are not majority of us are not middle class. So the very little middle class also have to understand, if you truly say that you are Africans, because sometimes like we say we come from the continent, but we don't understand truly what that means. And the one thing, if we take anything away from this entire conversation, especially to our people, you're not in love with the continent. Fall back in love with Africa and understand that it's going to take sacrifices to liberate Africa, to transform Africa into the continent we can all be proud of. It's not just going to be on the back of these leaders. They need our support. If we're not willing to make those sacrifices, those minor inconveniences, how the heck do we expect as a people to be liberated? It's never going to happen. It's gonna take all of us collectively. So yes, the Burkina Faso are gonna have to understand that this is a temporary infraction, but the bigger picture, long term, is going to be better for the country all around.
Yeah, but I there's very little I can say in disagreement. But again, this goes back to a month ago when Sandra asked us to offer our last words. I don't know if you would remember. I brought up the issue of the African middle class, Fanta. I don't know if you would remember. And it's as if I saw this coming, but I didn't. But if you do a class analysis of why we are basically marking time on the continent all three of us come from, if you do a class analysis, you realize that there is a certain class that more often than not is willing to trade what you would call sovereignty, what you would call African interest, Pan-African. They're willing to trade that for accumulation of not just wealth but power, because they have relationships that are transcontinental. They have relationships that are intercontinental, and so they need to maintain those relationships, and they need to maintain the advantages that they have at home. Again, I'm just saying that this alleged visa cessation, connects to more things than just, Burkina Faso versus the US. It also speaks to what can be done within countries, how interests can be managed. Like you said, you are advising people who take vacations in the West to maybe now look at, I don't know, China, take vacations within even the African continent.
Like, why not?
And not necessarily right. And that's a good idea. That's a good idea. As to whether they would like to go to school in Morocco or go to school in South Africa or go to school in Egypt instead of the Yales of the world, the Harvards of the world, the Columbias of the world, the SOASes of the world, the Cambridges and the Oxfords. That is another thing altogether. And that's what I'm saying.
Let's talk proximity, because the math is important. We cannot generalize with this conversation.
Yeah, but again, that's what we're having that conversation.
Very few people.
Fanta, we are having that conversation.
Not the broader public.
It doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much.
Cannot make decision for the broader public. We clean their houses.
True, but it doesn't take that much.
The people that I'm talking about, right? The broader public clean their houses. They take care of their children. They cook their food. So you see, we have to move out of this selfish state. We have to fall back in love with our continent. Not just, we like Africa. We love Africa.
Talk to Africa's aspirational class. Fanta,
I think
talk to Africa's aspirational class.
Fanta is making is how many of those people, like, what is the size of that group?
Sandra, it doesn't take that much.
But
it doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much
has
to
got to
upset
make
the government.
sacrifices.
Cool.
Right,
it doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much to upend a government, especially if you have the connections and the wherewithal within the country. It doesn't take that much to upend governments that are not even stable. And I'm actually even talking about. Wait, Fanta a second. I am talking about how
who thinks because their U.S. visa is going to be revoked, they should orchestrate a coup against their own government. That person should face capital punishment. Those people should face.
People have orchestrated coups for less than American visas.
We're sick and tired of these elites controlling our countries, right? For their temporary vices. You do not represent the broader public. You do not. You are very tiny compared to the broader population. Stop being selfish and making these atrocious decisions that are impacting the entire continent. You have debilitated the growth of this continent, and we are rejecting you. That is ridiculous. And we must all say no to that. We cannot justify their temporary infractions and make sacrifices to put the risk of the broader population, to put the lives at risk, the welfare, the well-being of the population at risk. We cannot do that, Nee. We should not do that.
This is a win-win for me, because at least we are talking about class. We're actually looking at an African problem in terms of class, and this is a win-win for me. That's what I've been doing throughout all of these things, because again, I keep saying you need to confront class elements. You need to actually confront those people who have something to gain from the system staying the way it is. If you don't confront that, all of this Pan-Africanism and nationalism, we need to be patriotic, won't work, because class elements have transcontinental, intercontinental relationships that guarantees and perpetuates their, their holdings within the countries they live in. And so Burkina Faso will need to, I'm actually speaking, my contribution is actually asking the Burkinabe government, as if they are consulting me, but I'm saying that what history has taught us is that when the interest of a certain class that is probably just a step below par or right around the neighborhood of par, when their interests are threatened, they will go all the way. We saw that in Ghana. We saw that.
So guys, I want us to really leave and I want to move on to the next topic here. But assuming that this is not the end, right? And that there will be more sanctions or whatever coming from the U.S. for Burkina Faso. What do you? Let's be realistic too, right? In our solutions or suggestions for Burkina Faso. What should they do? What should they do if the consequences are real, right? How should they prepare for what comes next? What are your thoughts?
There needs to be a collective understanding, discussion, commitment, determination that prioritizes the well-being of the nation. And all the classes needs to understand, look, we should not discount anyone, be it the middle class, the lower class, the upper class, the elites, right? We should not discount anyone's voice. But every one of those classes, every one of those group of people, those demographics have to understand, if we stand a chance, if our nation stand a chance at truly being sovereign, if our children stand a chance at truly being considered equal to those of the Western children, right? We have to focus on establishing and solidifying our sovereignty. That entails supporting those visions that will lead us to that sovereign state, that true sovereign state, infrastructurally, in every single way. Look, it is not wild to say, yeah, the Burkinabe should go out of the country for school, but we see it really comes down to the leadership. When you have a wonderful leader who is doing everything he can and instituting practical solutions in every single sector, from the education sector to the healthcare to roads and what have you, we have to support that, right? Because look, let's be reminded, civilization did not start in the West. The first center of education was not in the West. It was in Timbuktu, Mali. So the Harvards you talk about, right? The Harvards, the Yales, right? They borrowed from Timbuktu, from the institutions in Mali. So let's understand, this knowledge we seek, it is only because we have been subjected to colonialism, to imperialism, to Western hegemony, that we have this exodus of the youth looking outside, thinking that everything good must be outside. But if only our leaders have a vision to establish those very opportunities at home, every single class should support that. And if you do not support that, you're treasonous.
Yeah. Nee, your quick final words on that. And I want to ask you all about the upcoming elections tomorrow in Cameroon,
Yeah,
where we will have our oldest president in the world at 92. Anyway, yeah, go for it.
yeah. I mean, so there's a again. I'm referring listeners and viewers to the writings of Amilcar Cabral, first president of Guinea-Bissau and Cabo Verde. It talks about class suicide, that people who come from privileged upbringing, privileged, not just privileged upbringing, but they have a holding within the status quo, should learn to commit class suicide in the interest of sovereignty, in the interest of Pan-Africanism, in the interest of their fellows. They should learn to commit class suicide. And it's an intriguing conversation on what the middle classes and the upper middle classes and the petit bourgeoisie can do to help fellows. So just for those listening or those viewing, you can just learn about class suicide by Amilcar Cabral. It's an attempt by an African who was actually fighting for independence for the people of Guinea-Bissau and Cabo Verde, who had the same problem of people who had benefited from colonialism, from Portuguese colonialism, fighting him. They're telling him, man, we don't need you to shake things. And so it's not as if we've not been here before. And that's what I keep going back to history. Some of these things actually would be boring to a lot of historians because they actually realize, oh, this is just the cycle, spinning on its own axis. So I think we should take a look at class suicide and see how best the state can manage interest and all of that.
All right. Well, we'll be following this story.
You want me to talk about Biya?
Yes. Let's talk about Biya tomorrow. So he's been in power for 43 years. I'm going to go straight to the point. Been in power for 43 years. Is running for eighth term at the age of 92, guys. 92. This is the president of Cameroon. So elections are tomorrow, guys. What do you have to say about this?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask us to predict the results.
Wait.
I think we all know
because
this.
usually we
Predict
know
the results. Yes, go ahead, predict it.
Let me.
It is my prediction.
Wait.
By the time this airs tomorrow, we would know the results. But go ahead and predict. Surprise
South Africa,
us.
you might probably need to wait for 48 days for us to get the numbers right. And by the numbers right, I mean that certain numbers should actually.
Well,
yeah.
Let me say this, right, and just bear with me here because this is one that I feel is also really important, and our audience should really pay attention to this. This is the segment that I call the oldest leaders on the youngest continent, right? Mm-hmm. We keep talking about Africa demographic dividend, its greatest asset, while we're actively installing a gerontocratic lock on its future. This is not just a political trend. This is a systemic failure. Look, let's put this very matter of factly. We are staring at a mathematical impossibility. You're talking about the median age across the continent is 19 years. Let's be very precise, 19.3 years old. Yet the average age of African leaders is 63. Think about that. The gap, right? It's just a generational gap. It's a demographic dissonance. Like it's becoming quite impossible to ignore. It's so interesting. Cameroon is coming up tomorrow, as we were just talking about. The median age in Cameroon is 19. Paul Biya, the current president, has been in power for 43 years. He has been in power longer than most of his population, way before any of his, or a good number, I think 70% of his population were ever born. 43 years. 70% of his population were not born. I mean, right? Like, guys, like this is mind blowing. Think about, how do you draft a national vision? How do you draft national policies, right? The disconnect is it's so mind blowing. We're talking about an age of artificial intelligence, of quantum computing, of cloud computing, of robotics, of machine learning, Internet of Things. Paul Biya doesn't even know how to freaking turn on our computer. How the French does he represent a population who he does not connect with? What a disgrace. What are we doing? Look, the danger isn't just, like, let's be very clear. This is not about ageism, right? Is that these decade-long tenures, right, truly block fresh thinking. They block technological fluency. Ask Paul Biya, what is the when last he engaged with technology? Grandpa, please go to sleep. Let's go on the farm, Grandpa.
Okay.
Let's bring this back, because this is so important. This is like this demographic dividend we're talking about. Is it truly going to become a demographic debt? The upcoming elections in the Ivory Coast and Cameroon. We're seeing protests erupting today across the continent, primarily by the Gen Zs, millennials, in Kenya, in Madagascar, in Morocco, and other places. I mean, your Congos and Sudan are underwater at this point. Is Cameroon and Ivory Coast going to be the detonator that finally topples these regimes across the continent?
Nee, what's your reaction?
So I resent any sort of postulation that Paul Biya hasn't been around technology. And that's because he's been in the hospital a lot. So he's been around a lot of
biotechnology.
You know what? I try to keep a straight face.
Biotechnology will give him that.
Yeah, making it really difficult.
They've inserted like a few and
he's been around a lot of medical technology.
Yeah,
so my man is familiar with his tech.
Oh god.
He'll survive.
That being said, you talked about artificial intelligence. I mean, there are people who are artificially intelligent around these people, around these, you know.
Ask him about
you need to be a yes man.
Simple one. Like, ask about chat.
you need. I think what I'm trying to get at is the culture that enables this thing to happen.
Right.
I'm trying to get at the culture that enables this thing to, because I'm familiar with Malawi brought back a man who is now 85. Peter Mutharika is 85 years old. In the Côte d'Ivoire, like you said, they are deciding whether Mr. Alassane Ouattara can go for another term. Well, he is deciding whether he can go for another term. And he's in what? He's 70s, 80s? I'm not too sure about that.
And Uganda's president also plans to contest.
Yoweri Museveni has been around since my father was a teenager.
He's been in office. He's been in office close to Paul Biya, 40 years.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys remember Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal at a point. Before all of these, things started happening in Senegal that would lead to a sort of revolution that brought in the last president before Bashir Rufai right now. But we had the same problem. Senegalese had the same problem with Abdoulaye Wade. Zimbabwe had the same problem with Mr. Mugabe. Now, but I want us to look at, and we don't have the time, but it's better to look.
No,
at
we are
culture.
gonna have another breakdown panel just on this topic next
And
week. Because it's that important.
That's the most. Yeah, what culture enables this? What culture enables this? We may need to look at ourselves. It's all right to go at them and say, "Old man, retire," and that's important. We need to call them out. But what's the culture that enables, incentivizes? Again, almost always men who are over 60, 70 on a continent that is very young. What makes them think that they are people of the future after they've attained retirement age? They are the men for the future after they attain retirement age. And you see, unfortunately, they do not even come with progressive ideas. They don't necessarily.
They don't know where to find any.
They don't necessarily.
They don't know where to.
Yeah, they don't necessarily come with a reinterpretation of Pan-Africanism or a reinterpretation of capitalism.
Grandpa cannot even make it to put his shoes on. Like what are we talking about?
I mean, and there's
so
a thing.
For me, Sandra, a second.
Yeah,
if you were even coming, if you were 70 or 80 and you were even coming with ideas that are, quite revolutionary, I'll look the other way. Because again, one of the people I admire right now is Bernie Sanders. And yeah, some people would say he's not really a socialist. But then at least for all his problems, the man has progressive, radical views that challenges the status quo. So even if I had that on the continent from which I hail, and there's a man who is 80 and he has an interpretation of Pan-Africanism, of capitalism, of society that basically challenges the status quo, I could look.
We had that, but we killed
but
them.
These people are not coming.
We had that. We had Gaddafi, but we killed him. Look, I've traveled a lot. I've traveled throughout the continent. I have been north. I have been central. I have been, of course, I'm from the west. I have been east. I have traveled the continent a lot. And I will tell you this. We had that. When I traveled throughout the continent, what I saw was development, infrastructure development happening by Libya, by Gaddafi, through every single country that I went to, including like Mali, Senegal, Togo, Benin, Kenya, Ethiopia, the list goes on. Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia. He was a Pan-Africanist. Even in his last UN address, he exposed Western hypocrisy. We had that. What do? The very African leaders supported the CIA to get rid of him. The people, I understand your point about the people, right? It goes back to the point that I was making. These very tiny middle class needs to understand it's gonna take all of us. Do not be selfish and put the entire continent at risk. Because you want to maintain your connections on the continent and outside of the continent, you will support these atrocious leaders who need help, even feeding. They can't even lift their own spoons. Because you want to continue to steal. No,
but there's also something to be said about.
I love my grandparents.
Right.
When you
no. That's where I was going with this, right? That's where I was going with this. That I remember my, grandmother, may she rest in peace. When she was 92, she could barely see, right? She could, and she aged beautifully, right? I mean, I can't imagine a 92-year-old making any sound policy decisions. I just can't. That's why retirement is there. You have to age gracefully, and at some point you have to bow out and let someone else come in. But these African leaders are not doing that. And they've set up systems that it's really, really hard to why are you just
I have more
I just remember that my grandmother will be 92 this coming Friday, and I'm just thinking,
imagine her making a policy decision. Imagine.
Yeah. It just
so
popped in
these
my head.
people are definitely not running the country, and then the question is, if they're not, who is really behind them making the decisions?
So go
That's
beyond
the question.
them. Go beyond them and investigate the culture. the culture and the system that props them up, right? It's. Let me give an example. Although, sorry, let me give a just short example. There's the thing with Eswatini taking deportees from the US. It's being discussed within Eswatini or Swazi civil society, and it's been alleged by South African press that $5.2 million was given to Eswatini in exchange for receiving this. Now, the government of Eswatini hasn't confirmed that, but that's what the South African press is alleging. Now, this is funny because the money is supposedly for Eswatini's border security. Border security. Eswatini is a country, as according to one lawyer, and I quote, Eswatini is a country people get away from, not come into. Because a lot of Swazis will be working in South Africa and all of that, because South Africa is a much bigger economy. And so how are you committing monies to Eswatini's border security? And then you ask yourself, who actually has that money?
Yeah.
Who gets that money? The same thing with Uganda. Why would a man in his 80s or late 70s commit to taking deportees from the US? Why? He needs the perpetuation of authority. He needs the support system for him to keep being there. He needs it. And sometimes the support system is internal, but also external. And so when you actually investigate the culture and the support system that props them up, you realize that you are not ending up just with the upper or middle classes in their countries. You are also ending up in Western capitals.
It is these middle classes.
These people are being propped up.
It's these very middle classes, and I love my brother. Like, look.
Oh, it's a collusion. It's a collusion.
It's a collusion. Absolutely.
I can
Absolutely.
get to that.
They're the ones orchestrating like these deals. They're absolutely because they kick back. Let's call it what it is. They get kickbacks. Also, right? You then see these contracts goes to who? It goes to these middle classes. It goes to the Western expats. So the money, not only like that 5-point-something million is not going to 100% stay in Eswatini. I guarantee you a good 50% of that is going to be repatriated right back to the very Western country via their expats and their contracts. That's what it is. That is the mode of operandi, like with the IMF, with the World Bank, and certainly with these deals that are happening. One like and just to kind of put like a final thought on this gerontocracy that we have seen that has been imposed upon us. We have to act ourselves as a people. When a continent of over 60% of the population is led by a class of octogenarians, what does that make us? What does that make you as a middle class? If you sign up on this, what does that make you?
And there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot, and I want us to continue following. Tomorrow we see the results. I think, I want to say we might be surprised, but I don't think we really will be surprised. We kind of know how it's going to go. But let's follow the story tomorrow.
Octogenarians die. Just die. Die.
We'll talk about it next week.
Die. Fire.
We'll talk about it. All right, guys. Breakdown family. Have a great week. See y'all next week. Bye.